In the climactic battles against the Islamic State group, the US and UK military relied on their allies in the Syrian Democratic Forces to do the hard yards. And the mainly Kurdish force took many casualties in that battle, but now finds out that its traditional enemies, the Turkish army, are being given the nod by the White House to enter Syria.
They're the guys who've rolled up ISIS. I mean, this is the only stable part of Syria. These guys have lost 12,000 fighters from their population of about, what, 2 million. These have been our boots on the ground. And yet two NATO allies, America and Turkey, are actually, conspiring to stitch them up.
The proposed Turkish security zone extends 20 miles into northern Syria. Much of the territory of the West's SDF allies is outside that strip, including the Al-Hol camp, where thousands of women and children captured when the caliphate fell are being held. But the problem for the Kurdish forces is that their key population centres, Kobani and Kamishli, are inside that proposed buffer zone, and so are a couple of secret facilities where up to 12,000 fighters from the Islamic State group are being held and whose future is now unclear.
It depends on how far the Turks will go inside Syria. The situation may turn into a big chaos. The SDF may find themselves at the end, like they have to release those prisoners. It's a very dangerous situation, not only to northeast Syria, but also to the security here in Britain, in Europe, and the global security.
The president dropped his bombshell in a tweet this morning, announcing the US pullback by saying, "It is time for us to get out of these ridiculous, endless wars, many of them tribal, and bring our soldiers home," and blaming Europe for not repatriating IS prisoners held there. But criticism wasn't long in coming, including from allies.
If I didn't see Donald Trump's name on the tweet, I thought it would be Obama's rationale for getting out of Iraq. So here's what's going to happen. This is going to lead to ISIS reemergence. Nothing better for ISIS than to create a conflict between the Kurds and Turkey. The Kurds will now align with Assad because they have nobody to count on because we abandoned them. So this is a big win for Iran and Assad, a big win for ISIS.
But the president later doubled down, threatening Turkey.
I have told Turkey that if they do anything outside of what we would think is humane, to use the word a second time, we talk about Hong Kong, we talk about this, they could suffer the wrath of an extremely decimated economy.
There have already been shows of support for IS and attempted revolts in the camps, and even before today's announcement, concerns that the SDF was facing a reborn Islamist insurgency.
Around Deir ez-Zor, there is certainly a regrouping of IS, and in a large chunk of the area that the Syrian Kurds control, the Syrian Democratic Forces actually lock themselves up in their bases at night, and this territory is increasingly run by ISIS and by sleeper cells, which just goes to show we need to continue to work with these people who have been such fantastic allies to us.
This evening, US troops pulled back from some of their positions on the Turkish border, while the row about the president's sudden decision reverberated in Washington.
That was Mark Urban. Joining us now, our US correspondent David Grossman, who's in Washington. We heard a little bit of what Donald Trump was saying in the White House. Just fill us in there, David, a bit further.
Yeah, I think President Trump was trying to reassure some of the critics in his own party. I'm not sure that he will have done that. What he said was that he wasn't taking sides with anybody by withdrawing these US troops, but that America couldn't be the world's policeman, and that there was a need to bring the troops home. We couldn't have these endless wars. This is a familiar theme from President Trump, but there's been a lot of upset about this, particularly since, it wasn't that long ago that his Defense Secretary, James Mattis, resigned over this very issue. And in January this year, the Senate passed a resolution saying that the continued presence of US troops in northern Syria was in the US national interest.
There's been quite strong reaction from leading Republicans, people who've really allied themselves closely with President Trump, very much against him on this decision tonight.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you can put it in two categories. There's one category of people you might call the usual suspects that the president will be easily able to dismiss. But there are others who he will have more difficulty in dismissing, because these are the people that went to see the president last December when he first floated this idea and tried to talk him down. People like Republican Lindsey Graham, who took the unusual step of ringing in a Fox News show, Fox and Friends, which the president is known to watch, to deliver from a normally supportive senator a blistering criticism of the policy. He said that it was impulsive, short-sighted and irresponsible. He called it a stain on America's honour. Another senator, normally very supportive, Mitch McConnell, was equally critical of this. He said that a precipitous withdrawal of US forces from Syria would only benefit Russia, Iran and the Assad regime. And it would increase the risk that ISIS and other terrorists regroup. Now, this comes at a time, of course, when the president's foreign policy, the way he does foreign policy, by these phone calls, and there was a phone call with President Erdogan of Turkey yesterday before this announcement, the way he does foreign policy is under intense scrutiny, and this will not help him in the impeachment battles that he has ahead.
Really interesting. David, thanks very much. Well, joining us now, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry. I guess you pick your side, Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham or Donald Trump. Do you have any sympathy for what the US president is trying to do here?
I have to say my first sympathy goes to the Kurdish people in northern Syria. You know, they have lost tens of thousands of people fighting this terrible death cult in Syria, and they've done most of the fighting. And the idea that just overnight the president just says, no, we're off, and of course gives a green light to Turkey to move in. Turkey talks about only wanting to have a buffer, but they want a much larger buffer than the Americans, than has originally been agreed. And also we know that not only that, but Erdogan wants to move non-Kurdish refugees from Turkey, of which he has many, millions and more, back into that area in order to water down the Kurdish population, in order to undermine the Kurds' claim for there to be a territory which is largely Kurdish.
Do you think this will bring back or open the door to the resurgence of ISIS?
Well, I think that clearly that's going to be a problem. I mean, obviously, the American troops per se are not going to themselves be stopping the growth of ISIS. What stops the growth of ISIS is the Kurds in that area. But if the Kurds have to then turn and start fighting the Turks that start invading and wanting to repatriate or patriate Syrians not from that area but who are not of Kurdish descent, then the chaos ensues, and in that chaos we can have the rebirth.
So who stops Turkey then? America won't come back. Should EU troops go in?
Well, I don't necessarily believe that America won't come back. I think that what we're seeing tonight is really interesting. I think that when you see that level of criticism from allies of Donald Trump's, I think that there is a big push to move back. I don't believe this is the Pentagon's policy. I don't believe that there's briefings coming out of America saying that actually this isn't necessarily true. So we are seeing being played out in front of us a fight for foreign policy in America.
I guess what I'm asking
which is pulling against what Donald Trump has been putting in tweets.
Do we have a responsibility in this? I mean, Donald Trump's tweets definitely threw it onto the shoulders of Europe as well. Jeremy Corbyn, I think, said in 2017, if arms were being used against the Kurds, they simply should not be supplied to them. Should we stop selling arms to Turkey at this point?
What we should do is we should be making it clear that the Kurds should have a place at the peace talks. There are peace talks going on, and there are also talks about what the Syrian constitution ought to look like. And the Kurds are excluded from both of those talks because the Turks are vetoing it. So first of all,
but you wouldn't withdraw arms sales to Turkey at this point.
So what I'm saying is the three things. So first of all, they should be involved in talks. We should, of course, be making it perfectly clear as an international community that it would be completely unacceptable for the Turks to essentially move into that area or invade. That would be completely wrong. That seems to me. And thirdly, we should be making it quite clear, and actually the UN should make it quite clear, that it would be completely unacceptable for Turkey to put Syrian refugees who do not come from that area into that area, as Erdogan has said he's going to. So those are the three things we should be working on.
I want to ask you about other areas of diplomacy tonight. Okay. Boris Johnson, we know, has asked President Trump to reconsider the immunity of the diplomat's wife, her name Ansa Kulis, who killed 19-year-old Harry Dunn. Should we rethink this as a criminal case?
I think it says a lot about our relationship with America. I think that we should be... These are supposed to be allies. We're supposed to be able to, whatever the niceties are, I think that we are perfectly within our rights to say to the Americans, at the very least, this diplomat's wife ought to have remained in the UK in order to answer questions. Because if that boy's parents can't get justice with her standing trial, at the very least, they should get some answers. And it's wrong for her to have run away from her responsibility
She's
in this way.
suspected of killing him in her car. Dominic Raab said he was disappointed. What would your words be at this point?
I just think it's wrong, and I think that we should be asking the Americans for her to come back and answer questions of the police so that at least we have a clearer idea as to how this poor boy died. And if they are true friends of ours, that's what they should do.
So what does it tell you about our standing in the international stage if we don't appear to have the power to keep a murder or manslaughter suspect in this country? We can't free Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe after years in an Iranian jail when the Australians seemed to manage it in 3 months. And we look as if we've given up on Hong Kong students protesting for their lives.
I think that there are many consequences of Brexit and the mess that we've got into. And I think that one of the things is that we have become completely preoccupied with Brexit and everything has fallen down a Brexit black hole. So we have no time and no bandwidth to be able to continue to play our role on the international stage. We have always been big players, much bigger than really our size, because we work with other countries with the same outlook as us, because we've always been great multilateralists, because many of the great multilateral organisations we were a key part of their development. We are on the Security Council. We have a role internationally. We've always been the clever boy or girl in the corner of the room who everyone looks to and says, well, what does Britain think? So it isn't just that we have no bandwidth because of Brexit, but also the chaos itself has undermined our standing as a country, because we used to be the sensible, the clever ones, the ones who could think things through in a calm way, and we have not been behaving like that over the last 3.5 years.
What would you be doing now if you were in power to get Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe out? Would you be paying money to free her?
No, I would not be paying money to free anyone, because I think if you set up that as a principle, then frankly every extreme country around the world could be seizing hostages, British hostages, and asking for money. You can't do that. I think there are certainly things that we should be doing in terms of trying to ensure that the Iranian nuclear deal remains on its feet. And I think that it's right that the British have that attitude, but I don't see us doing as much as we could be doing by way of ensuring that we can continue to work with our European allies so that we can get round the sanctions that the Americans are imposing, not just on countries that trade with Iran, but any country that trades with Iran and America. Their sanctions are so like a great spider's web and are chilling any opportunity of any country or company that wants to trade with Iran at the moment. We should be much more proactive than we are.
Emily, thank you.